بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ألف لام ميم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا خيرة الله وابن خيرته، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور، السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله، لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام، وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت، ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها، ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم، ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله، إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان، ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة، ولعن الله ابن مرجانة، ولعن الله عمر بن سعد، ولعن الله شمرا، ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عظم مصائبك، فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله، إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بمبالاتك وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونصب لك الحرب، وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم. وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشيائكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم، وتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بمبالاتكم ومبالاة وليكم، وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب، وبالبراءة من أشيائهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة، وأن يثبتني عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله، وأن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته، مصيبة أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد، اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله، في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية، عليهم منك اللعنة أبد العابدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا، ثم العن الثاني والثالث والرابع. اللهم العن يزيد خامسا، والعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجانة وعمر بن سعد وشمرة وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم. الحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود، وثبتني قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. السلام على النساء الحائرات. Salam be upon the bewildered women. Assalamu ala al-khiyam al-khaliyat. Salam be upon the empty tents of Hussein and his family. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala awlad al-Hussein وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: فسقى لهما ثم تولى إلى الظل فقال رب إني لما أنزلت إلي من خير فقير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Tonight's majlis is dedicated to the one and only, the lady that held the torch after Imam al-Hussein's martyrdom and carried his standard and continued the mission and managed all the events that transpired after Ashura. Lady Zainab alayhi salam. We can't begin to imagine what Lady Zainab faced on the day of Ashura and in the aftermath. What Zainab saw is indescribable. We can't describe what she went through, let alone her ordeal being experienceable. No man, no woman in history has ever seen what Lady Zainab saw. She witnessed the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. And Imam al-Hussein to her was everything. Imam al-Hussein wasn't just her soulmate. Her husband decided to stay in Medina, Abdullah ibn Ja'far. But she refused to part ways with her brother, especially when his life is at stake. She took her children and she went to Karbala with the Imam. And she was so protective of Imam al-Hussein that when her two children were killed, history does not mention anything about Zainab's reaction to her children's death. Why? Because she didn't want to add to Imam al-Hussein's pain and anguish. This is why she remained silent. And when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, this is to understand the deep relationship and connection between Zainab and her brother Hussein. When Imam al-Hussein in the holy city of Karbala, she knew that Imam al-Hussein was going to be killed. But when the Imam made the official announcement of his death as he was fixing his sword, he started reciting a poem implying that he won't be able to evade death. So when Lady Zainab heard his words, she began beating her head. What did she say? She said, now I felt my grandfather's death. Now I feel my mother's death. You know, Lady Zainab was orphaned at a young age. She was perhaps 3 when her mother Fatima al-Zahra was killed and passed away eventually after she was attacked. Now I can feel my father Amir al-Mu'mineen's death. Why? Because when Rasulullah passed away, Lady Zainab had a mother, she had a father, and she had 2 wonderful brothers. After Rasulullah, her mother died. Her solace was her father and her 2 brothers. After the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, her solace was her 2 brothers, Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein. When Imam al-Hassan was poisoned to death, her only solace was Imam al-Hussein. And one of the reasons why the tragedy of Karbala is unlike any other tragedy that befell the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Imam Ali was killed, Imam al-Hussein, Imam al-Hassan was killed, Fatima al-Zahra was killed, is because he was the last member of the people of the cloak. This is why, as they were about to leave Karbala, Lady Zainab, she threw herself, inshallah I'll talk about this at the end of the majlis, she threw herself on the body of her brother Imam al-Hussein, and she said, Akhi Aba Abdullah, if I was given the choice of either staying with you, even now that you're dead, staying with you, or leaving you, I would choose to stay with you, even if the beasts of the desert would devour me while I'm alive. لاخترت البقاء عندك على الرحيل عنك. I want to stay with you, even now that you're dead. I can't leave you. And it's not just the tragedies that she faced. Lady Zainab was an exceptional lady. She inherited the traits of her mother, Fatima al-Zahra. She was tasked with the biggest mission in history. She had to continue Imam al-Hussein's journey. And I can't imagine Karbala without Zainab alayhi salam. Some people, non-Shias of course, they say that Imam al-Hussein was wrong when he took his family and children to war. These people underestimate Zainab's role. From the very beginning, the Imam said, the same Lord that wants to see me martyred in his way to save his children, to save his religion and the adherents of the religion of Islam, he wants to see the woman being paraded in different cities. The enemies, they launched a campaign. They knew all along that after killing Imam al-Hussein, they have to resort to covering up the crime. So they wanted to distort Imam al-Hussein's message, distort his revolution. What they did was, they said that Imam al-Hussein rose against the religion of his grandfather, so he was killed with the sword of Rasulullah himself. The sword that was used to wage a war against Imam al-Hussein was his grandfather's sword. And we are ruling in the name of his grandfather. Yes, because he is causing disunity and he wants to destroy the religion of his grandfather. But Lady Zainab did not let this happen. She first went to Kufa. The people of Kufa knew. Unlike the people of Sham who were ignorant. They were left in the dark. She went to the city of Kufa and she gave a sermon. I need perhaps days or even weeks to speak about what Zainab did and to explain her sermons. She mopped them with the floor, the people of Kufa. And no one dared to answer her. No one dared to speak when she was speaking. They say that everyone was silent. And then they began to cry. They were weeping tears as she was speaking. Then she went to Sham. She turned the tables. Even Yazid didn't have an answer. This is when he said that I didn't kill Hussein. It was Ubaidullah that killed him. These were not my orders. And he was lying. Because Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he sent to the head of Imam al-Hussein He sent the head of Muslim and Hani, when he killed Muslim and Hani in Kufa, he sent it to Yazid. He hanged the two heads on the main gate of his palace. And then he sent the head of Imam al-Hussein. He wrote him a letter thanking him. And then he asked him to come to Sham. And he handsomely gave him gifts. And they spent one night drinking alcohol together. And he allowed Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to enter inside his house and to spend the night with his wife, with his sisters, with his wives, with his damsels. This wicked man. So he was the one that issued the orders without a doubt. But Lady Zainab, the logic that she used, the rhetoric that she spoke with, made even Yazid try to disassociate himself from the killing of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And the first majlis that was ever held, perhaps, was a majlis inside the palace of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, when everyone began to cry. When Lady Zainab spoke and when Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam spoke. And even the wife of Yazid, she came out without a scarf in front of everyone. So Yazid was astonished. She said to him that you have uncovered the heads of the children of Rasulullah while you want me to wear a scarf. So the first rebel to stand against Yazid's rule was Hind, the wife of Yazid, la'anahullah. So she was tasked with this colossal task to not only propagate the message of Imam al-Hussein, to promote the teachings of Imam al-Hussein, to make sure that the revolution of Imam al-Hussein is not distorted. Now tonight I would like to explore just one aspect from the life of Lady Zainab. And this aspect is how Zainab was able to manage the crisis after the martyrdom of our master Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And this is a crucial topic. We as believers are cornered. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes He tests us. And when we are tested, when we are pressed, when we are under pressure, our real, true nature would surface, would become visible. Sometimes a person can be pretentious. I pretend to be a loyal friend. I pretend to be generous. I pretend to be courageous. I pretend to have chivalry. But when I am pressed, my true characteristics and qualities surface. This is why Imam Ali alayhi salam says in a hadith, عند تقلب الأحوال علم معادن الرجال. During the ups and downs and turns and twists, you can acquire the science of discovering people's real traits. This is why they say that if you want to know a person's reality, travel with that person. Spend few days with that person. Anger that person to test his temper, to test his other characteristics. One day, a king from the Middle East who died, he was traveling with his entourage, with his senior advisors, with his ministers, whom compete over showing loyalty to the king. So they were traveling together. Suddenly, the aircraft had to make an emergency landing. It landed, apparently one of the engines was faulty, and they could see fire coming out of the engine. So as soon as the plane ended and they opened the door, all the people that were in the aircraft, aboard the aircraft, they tried to leave the aircraft. This king was short, so they pushed him back so they can leave before him, because they expected the airplane to explode. So these same people that display their loyalty, pretend to be loyal to the king, when they were cornered, this is how they behaved. So this is how the king realized that these people are not loyal. When push comes to shove, this is their reality. So one of the reasons why we are placed in a corner is that so we understand our deficiencies and our weaknesses. Sometimes we don't even know about our true nature. Only when we are cornered, we understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the verse that I crowned the majlis with he talks about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and crisis management is displayed in the story, is demonstrated in the story of Musa alayhi salam. So Musa, he went to Egypt, and there was an incident between him and an Egyptian. He wanted to rescue a fellow Israelite. When he engaged in a fight, he punched the Egyptian, resulting in his death. So the authorities were looking for Moses. They wanted to arrest him and perhaps even kill him. So Moses alayhi salam had to escape. He ran away. He left Egypt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Musa when he left Egypt by saying, فَخَرَجَ مِنْهَا خَائِفًا يَتَرَقَّبُ, while he was in a state of fear, watching his back, making sure that the authorities will not arrest him. Why? Because he has a mission in life, in the future. So Musa alayhi salam, he leaves Egypt to go to Madian. All the details are mentioned in the Quran. He was in a state of fear. Usually when we are in a state of fear, we don't behave rationally. You know how they say that a drunken person's talks are a sober man's thoughts. Usually when you are in fear, you behave in accordance with your reality. So he was in a state of fear, and he was very hungry. The hadith says that he had nothing to eat because he was running away and he was in the middle of the desert, except the grass and the vegetation of the soil for 5 days, or perhaps even more, for 5 days, until his sides turned green, the hadith says. So he was hungry. He was in fear of the authorities, and he had nowhere to go until he reached the city of Madian. He reaches the city of Madian. He finds that a group of people had gathered around a well. It wasn't an ordinary well. It was a well used by the people to water the flocks, the sheep and the animals. So he noticed that there is a group of bullies, a group of aggressive men around the well, while there are 2 women who are waiting on the side for these bullies to finish watering all their flocks so they can water their sheep. He didn't like this spectacle, this scene. And a person with chivalry would not tolerate such a scene. We see this in the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we see this in the life of Imam al-Hussein, we see this in the life of all the prophets of God. These women are being oppressed. They don't tolerate oppression, especially if the oppressed is weak. In Ziyaratul Nahiyya, we recite, Ziyaratul Nahiyya is about Imam al-Hussein. The pivot of the ziyarah is Imam al-Hussein. In Ziyaratul Nahiyya, we recite that you would not tolerate the oppression of the strong. If you see a person being oppressed because he is weak, you defend that person. So Musa alayhi salam went to the men, to the bullies that were there, and he pushed them away. He was a strong man. And part of his strength was derived from his reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It wasn't just physical strength. So he pushed them away, and he helped the woman water the flocks. They say that the well was huge, and the bucket needed 10 men to pull, but he did it on his own. So he took the water out and he gave it to the woman, and they were very happy. And that day they went back early. They used to go with sunset, but they were at home by noon. So they say that the 2 women, who happened to be the daughters of Shu'aib, the prophet of God, as mentioned in the Quran, they said to Musa alayhi salam, they wanted to return the favor. They said, we want to pay you back. They wanted to pay him money. Musa refused. He said that if you fill the entire world with gold and silver, I won't take it. Because this was a quality that he possessed that motivated him to take action in defense of the woman. He wasn't working for them. He didn't do it for money. This is what we call chivalry. So he refused, even though he was in need of food. The guy was hungry for 5 days. He didn't have anything to eat. But you do an act of kindness and then you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reward comes from God. Don't expect the people to give you their approval, to give you their likes. You go to God. That's why there's a hadith that says that if you carry out an act of kindness, Allah will save it for you. When you are in trouble, when you are in need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use this act of kindness to protect you, to shield you from trials and tribulations. So what Musa does is he goes to the shade. فَتَوَلَّى إِلَى الظِّلِّ, the Quran says, فَقَالَ رَبِّ إِنِّي لِمَا أَنزَلْتَ إِلَيَّ مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَقِيرٍ. I am in need of you, O God. The hadith says that he was asking God for a loaf of bread. That's what he wanted. In Ziyarat al-Nahiyya again, Ziyarat al-Nahiyya, at the beginning of the ziyarah, you send your salutations on the prophets of God. And then it's about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Then after the ziyarah, there is a supplication, very beautiful supplication. In the supplication, we read that the wealthiest person is a person that feels his need to God. You are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. While the poorest person is a person that does not feel that need in him, the need for God. So he goes in the shade and he says, Rabbi, inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. It's astonishing how Musa alayhi salam was seeking God's guidance and God's intervention. When he first entered the city, he asked God for guidance. And this is the real form of istikhara. You ask God to choose for you. So he said, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. He asked God for a loaf of bread. But what did God give him? He gave him a wife and a life. Then the two daughters of Shu'aib, they go back home and they tell their story to their father. They say to him, they give him a suggestion. They say to him, استأجره, hire him, employ him. إن خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين. They didn't know that he was a prophet of God. He was Moses. This was perhaps before his prophethood, because he reached prophethood when he was 40, when he reached 40. So this is their suggestion, hire him. Now there is a hadith, the background of the story is that Shu'aib alayhi salam, he used to cry. He cried for 10 years. Every night he spends the night crying. Until he lost his vision. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restored his vision for him. He cried for another 10 years. He lost his vision again, turned blind. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, he restored his vision again. He said to him, why do you cry? He said, out of love for you. Love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said, if that's the case, I will make the dearest person to me serve you, to become your servant. So Musa comes to the city. There's a hadith that says that if a mu'min enters a city and there's only one mu'min in that entire city, the heart of that mu'min will lean towards that mu'min. There's this connection. The hadith says that a mu'min is a brother of a mu'min, a brother from another mother, as they say. Abuhu nur, the father is light, wa ummuhu rahma, while the mother, their mother is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what bonds them together. استأجره, hire him. إن خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين. He is both strong and he is trustworthy. How did they know that he is trustworthy? First of all, he refused to take the money. So he's not a greedy person. And number two, because when Shu'aib sent one of his daughters, he was an old man, to invite Musa alayhi salam to come to his house. When he invited him, she went and she said to him that my father wants to see you. So he doesn't know where Shu'aib lives, but his daughter was walking in front of him while he was walking behind her. Then he said to her that I belong to a line of thinking, so to speak, that would not allow me to see the back of a woman. We respect women. Women are not objects to satisfy the desires of men. This is why I ask you not to walk in front of me. And how should I guide you to my house? You throw pebbles to show me the direction of your house. And then he goes, and then Shu'aib alayhi salam, he offers Musa one of his daughters, and he marries his daughter, and the rest of is history. There are two things that we need to understand in this story. First of all, you shouldn't lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if you feel that all the doors are shut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create a new door for you. Don't lose hope in God. The Prophet says that there is a verse in the Quran that if a person clings to that verse, he will become self-sufficient. He won't need anything. Which verse? وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. If you're mindful of God in your actions, in your deeds, in the things that you say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of you, and He will open new doors for you. This is why when Abu Dharr, he was expelled by Uthman, Imam Ali, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein came to say goodbye to him. Imam al-Hussein spoke to Abu Dharr. He said to him that you shouldn't be worried about your sustenance. Allah will take care of you. He said, Ya ibn Rasulillah, he spoke to the Imam. He said, Ya ibn Rasulillah, if I go to a place, I know that clouds don't exist in that place. Rain doesn't come down. I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of me and will bring down His sustenance upon me. I'm not worried about this at all. Don't lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at how God was managing the life of Musa alayhi salam. And number two, you should have trust in God. No matter what happens to you, if you're a mu'min, then everything that happens to you is in your best interest. This is what the hadith says. عَجِبْتُ لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. I am amazed at what happens to a mu'min. Whatever befalls him is in his best interest. If he becomes a gazillionaire, this is in his best interest. If he becomes poor to an extent where he doesn't have a loaf of bread to eat, then this is in his best interest. Everything that happens to him is in his best interest. This is why we find Lady Zainab alayhi salam, when she went to the city of Kufa, Ibn Ziyad, the Emir, who wanted to take advantage of her vulnerability, of her weakness. He just killed her brother, all her brothers, all her family members, and she is in shackles. And people couldn't speak in the presence of Ubaidillah. Anyone who dared to challenge the authority of Ubaidillah was killed straight away. She made Ubaidillah stutter. He couldn't speak in the presence of Zainab. He said, so, how did you find what God did to you? She said, مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا. As if Lady Zainab was able to foresee the events that unfolded in the future, and to see her lofty position in the society today, and how much she is respected. Everything that happens is in my best interest. What happened to my brother Hussein is in his best interest. And you, this is what she said to Yazid. She was so strong. She said, by God, you have peeled your own skin and you will face the consequences. When we look at Lady Zainab, we find that, as I said, she was an exceptional lady. But we can learn from Lady Zainab. And I believe that there is a huge void, especially in the life of the people in the West, that can be filled by Lady Zainab. Especially that there is a lot of talk about women empowerment. Come to Zainab. Once, my brother, His Eminence, Sayyid Mahdi al-Mudarrisi, he had a speech in the United States of America that was attended by a woman that was one of the pioneers of the Women's March in the United States. They were able to amass millions of women that rallied in the streets of Washington and the streets of America. The Women's March that now marks a historic date in people's calendar. There's a before and after in regards to this event. So she was sitting there, and Sayyid Mahdi spoke about Lady Zainab and about how she single-handedly brought down the entire empire of the Umayyads. So when she heard about Lady Zainab, she was moved. She said, I didn't know anything about this lady. We seek inspiration from people like Rosa Parks. Okay, she was able to bring about changes in the society, but there is no match, no comparison between Lady Zainab and any other woman in history. You want to seek inspiration and gain strength, you come to Lady Zainab and learn from Lady Zainab. Otherwise, she was a woman. She was a woman. She was in shackles. She was bereaved. She was in captivity. But no one was able to break Lady Zainab. She was very strong. And her strength wasn't based on irrational behavior. Like, she did understand what she was doing. She did understand the events that were happening, that surrounded her. But her bravery was leaning on her iman, on her tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on her chastity. She knew that God was on her side. She believed in the words of Rasulullah. She believed in what Imam al-Hussein told her. When she began to beat her head, when Imam al-Hussein told her that he will die, Imam al-Hussein just said one thing to her. He said, Ukhtah isbiri, Sister Zainab, be patient. And this was enough. This was enough. Lady Zainab never complained. Yes, poets say things as if Lady Zainab's talking about what she went through. But the reality is she never complained. And her role was to calm all the women and children down and give them solace and to empower them and give them strength and let them know that they are the progeny of Rasulullah. They have izzah, they have respect. She said to Yazid, Ya adu Allah wa ibn aduwah. I mean, if I wasn't forced to speak to you, I don't even see you worthy of me coming to talk to you. But you brought us here. Now that you brought us here, I'll have to respond to your nonsense. O enemy of God and the son of his enemy. Imagine Yazid was sitting on his throne. He is the emperor. He has the strength. He just killed Imam al-Hussein. He has the strength to galvanize the entire army, and he has the support of the people in Sham. Ya adu Allah wa ibn aduwah, inni la astasghiru qadrak wa asta'zimu taqri'ak. I belittle you. You are worthless in the general scheme of things. You think that you are strong, you think that you have the respect to the people, but in God's eyes you are worthless, and this is how I see you. Because what matters is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. The strength that she had, the iman that she had. You know what she did in the aftermath of the tragedy? Imagine a bunch of bereaved women who were widowed, all of them, in one day. A bunch of orphans that were hungry, that were thirsty. They didn't have food for 3 days. They didn't have water. How could you calm them down? If you have a son who cries because he's in fear, because he's hungry, how do you calm them down? She doesn't have food to give them. They didn't have water in the beginning. So she went and she calmed them down, all of them, and made sure that they all sleep that night, because she knew that what is to come isn't any less than what happened on the day of Ashura. So she calmed everyone down, and then she went to pray Salatul Layl. When we sleep late at night, we miss Salatul Subuh. Why? I was tired, I couldn't get up. Lady Zainab, despite what she went through, she didn't miss Salatul Layl. Imam Zain al-Abidin says, I believe it was because she sought strength from Salatul Layl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ista'inu bis-sabri was-salat," and seek strength from fasting. Sabr in this verse is a reference to fasting. Seek strength from fasting and seek strength from salat. This will give you power. This will empower you. Why is it that we break too quickly? Why is it that the divorce rate is so high? Why is it that the tolerance level is so low? Why? Because our iman is weak. Because our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not strong. But if you have a strong relationship with God, the Almighty, nothing can break you. You can overcome anything. A scholar was telling me, he said, my grandmother, she witnessed the death of not one or two, 13 of her children. One of her daughters was 13. Back in the day, people were not vaccinated, so they used to die quickly. 13 of her children. And yet, how did they tolerate this? How did they face these calamities with patience? Through iman. They lived a very modest life. For 50 years, they live in one room while having so many kids. It's their iman that empowers them. Their iman, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've probably heard the story of the grandfather of Ayatollah Sistani, and I don't want to take your time. He tried to see Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu sharif. What he did was recite Ziyarat Ashura for 40 consecutive weeks. He used to recite the ziyarah every day in a different mosque in the city of Mashhad. So one day he sees a light in the middle of the night in one of the alleys. So he follows the light. He understands that this is the light of the Imam. So he sees the light entering inside the house. So he tried to enter the house. Suddenly he is honored with saying the Imam of our time. The Imam said to him that if you want to see me, you have to do what similar to what this woman that I came to visit did. So he asked about her. He said that this woman, during Rida Shah's time, Rida Shah was a tyrant who imposed a ban on hijab. Imagine a Muslim majority country where the majority observe hijab, suddenly there is a ban imposed on them. So this woman did not leave her house for 8 years until Rida Shah died and the ban was reversed. She did not leave her home. And back then, if you wanted to take a shower, you had to go to a shower facility. For 8 years, she confined herself inside. How could you do this if you don't have enough iman and enough strength derived from your iman? So Lady Zainab went and prayed Salatul Layl. So what did they do to the woman and children in the aftermath? I spoke a little bit about the events that transpired. So they took them as captives, even though we don't have captives in Islam. But they called Imam al-Hussein Baghi, meaning he was a transgressor. He rebelled against they say, the legitimate authority, so he is Baghi. His women and children are taken as captives and his belongings are looted. This is why they went and snatched and stole all the clothings of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam until his body was exposed. One man took his turban, one man took his ring, and they took all the possession of the woman. To them, the family of a Baghi should not wear hijab. And this is what they tried to do to the women and children. One of the first things that they did to them was shackle them. They handcuffed them with chains. صُفِّدُوا بِالْحَدِيدِ, Imam al-Mahdi says in Ziyarat al-Nahiyah. And they treated them like slaves, like maids. Imagine how coward these people were. How could you treat children like this? How could you treat women like this? And imagine their entire journey to Sham that took 35 days, more or less. They were chained, they were shackled. That same night, Imam al-Hussein was beheaded and his head was taken to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah wanted to see the head of the Imam. What befell the head is indescribable. The first thing that happened to the head of Imam al-Hussein was that he was struck with a rock on his forehead. His forehead broke. The second thing that happened to the head of the Imam, because they threw so many pebbles at the Imam, the face of the Imam was swollen. And then the Imam was beheaded. Of course, his beard was dyed with his blood. He filled his hand with the blood of his heart, and he dyed his beard with it. And he filled his hand with the blood of Abdullah al-Radi' and did the same thing. And he said, this is how I want to meet my grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. They took the head. They placed the head in an oven. They used to hang the head of the Imam on their doors. They used to whip the head of the Imam. They used to lash the head of the Imam, the face of the Imam, with their whips. They placed the head on a long spear. And Lady Zainab didn't see the face of Imam al-Hussein from the moment he was killed until it was taken to Kufa. Only when she went to Kufa, she saw the face of the Imam, and she famously recited 2 lines saying, "O Hussein, my full moon, why do you look like a crescent now?" Because his face was covered with blood, was covered with dust, with dirt. يا هلالا لما استتم كمالا غاله خسفه فأبدا. Why is it that your face has been eclipsed now? And then she says, ما توهمت يا شقيق فؤادي. I knew about the events of Karbala, but I never knew that this will happen to your head, that they will be placing your head on a long spear. أن هذا مقدرا مكتوبا. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad ordered Umar ibn Sa'd to stay in Karbala the second day to bury the dead, the soldiers of whom? Of Umar ibn Sa'd, and to leave the bodies of Imam al-Hussein, his companions, without burial on the plains of Karbala. And for 3 days they stayed without burial, exposed. On the 11th of Muharram, they said that it's now time to leave to go to Kufa. These wicked men, they made the women and children go through the battlefield to see the horrors, to see the butchered bodies of Hussein and his family members. Imam Zayn al-Abidin said that as we were passing by, as I was looking at the bodies, I was about to die. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, who is an infallible Imam, he couldn't tolerate this scene. So he said, when my auntie Zainab tabayyanat dhalika minni, when she saw this, she said, "Mali araka tajudu binafsik." What is happening to you, O nephew? He said, "What do you mean, what is happening to me? These are the bodies, the body of my father Hussein." Imam Zayn al-Abidin knows who Hussein is. The angels know who Hussein is. I mean, you should expect me to die. Then she said to him, "Ya ibn akhi, this is a promise that God made to our grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Eventually these bodies will be buried, and Imam al-Hussein will become immortal, and people will lament over his death. Yes, now we can't cry over him. We can't weep over him. Whenever we cry, they whip us with their lashes. They lash us with their whips. But God will harness, will create people that will cry and weep over his death. And now we see the millions of people coming together and collectively weeping and crying over the tragedies of Imam al-Hussein. So as they were about to leave Karbala, when they passed by the bodies, suddenly Lady Zainab threw herself on the soil. She crawled to a body that she thought was the body of her brother. Why? Because it was covered with arrows, with spears, with daggers, with swords. She removed all the arrows and all the spears and everything. But she couldn't at first identify the body. Because how do you usually identify someone? Through their face. But Imam al-Hussein didn't have a head. Through their clothes. Imam al-Hussein was exposed through his ring, but Imam al-Hussein's finger was cut. So she said, Anta akhi, I can see resemblance between you and Rasulullah. I can see resemblance between you and your mother Fatima. I can see resemblance between you and your father, Amirul Mu'mineen. Then she began to speak to the Imam. أخي أبا عبد الله لو خيروني بين الرحيل أو البقاء عندك. If they give me a choice to either stay or leave you, لاخترت البقاء عندك ولو أن السباع أكلت من لحمي. I would choose to stay with you even if the wolves of the desert devour me and eat me alive. Lady Sukaina, who took solace from her auntie Zainab. Auntie Zainab would calm everyone down, but Lady Zainab is now on the ground and she's talking to our body. She said, Amma Zainab, who are you talking to? Zainab said to her, this is the body of your father Hussein, that Lady Sukaina couldn't identify. So Sukaina throws herself on the body of her father Hussein. She has a lot to complain about from her sufferings. But the first thing that she told her father, أباه انظر إلى رؤوسنا المكشوفة. Father Hussein, look at our exposed head. They took away our abaya, our cloak. They took away everything. انظر إلى عمتي المضروبة. Look at my auntie. Look at her skin, how it turned blue because of all the lashes. أبا يا حسين, look at what happened to us after you left us. أنعم جوابا يا حسين ما ترى. Look at who is taking care of us after you left. Our carer is now Shimr ibn Dhil Jawshan. أنعم جوابا يا حسين أما ترى شمر الخنا بالصوت ألم أضلعي فأجابها من فوق شاهقة القنا. Then the response came from Imam al-Hussein, from the head that was on the spear. فأجابها من فوق شاهقة القنا قضي القضاء بما جرى فاسترجعي. This is what God tested. Just say إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وتكفلي حال اليتامى وانظري, and take care of the orphans and the widows and do what I used to do to them. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين. Our only solace is the reappearance of Imam al-Mahdi. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten in his reappearance and to make us amongst his companions, loyal companions. Let's recite Dua al-Faraj together, wholeheartedly. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض, cure the sick, أشبع كل جائع, feed the hungry, أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين, and restore justice. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive those that passed away, especially the servants of Imam al-Hussein, to make us amongst them, and to grant us the visitation of the Imam and his intercession in the afterlife. Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha مع الإخلاص والصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خيرة الله وابن خيرته. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله، لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام، وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت، ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها، ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم، ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله، إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان، ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة، ولعن الله ابن مرجانة، ولعن الله عمر بن سعد، ولعن الله شمرا، ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. بأبي أنت وأمي، لقد عظم مصابيبك، فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله، إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بمضالاتك وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونصب لك الحرب، وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم. وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشيائكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم، وتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بمبالاتكم ومبالاة وليكم، وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب، وبالبراءة من أشيائهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم، وحرب لمن حاربكم، وولي لمن والاكم، وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي يكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة، وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله، وأن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته، مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد، ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد، اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله، في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية، عليهم منك اللعنة أبد الآبدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد، وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا، ثم العن الثاني والثالث والرابع. اللهم العن يزيد خامسا، والعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجانة وعمر بن سعد وشمرة وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم. الحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود، وثبتني قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.